welcome to the Integrated Schools Podcast. I'm Andrew, a white dad from Denver.
And I'm Val, a black mom from North Carolina.
And this is Advocating for Black Educator Wellness with Asia Lyons.
I'm super excited about this episode as a black educator, who I still identify as, and recognizing that our wellness is really important for our families and our students.
Yeah, Dr. Asia Lyons is actually a local friend who I know here in Denver, and we finally got a chance to have her come on the show. Her work has really focused on Black educator wellness. She runs a Black educator wellness cohort. Her dissertation work is on racial battle fatigue and its impact on not just Black educators, but also their families. And then she hosts a phenomenal podcast that everyone needs to listen to called The Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators, where she interviews Black teachers who have left education and gives them a chance to tell their story about why they left, about what it was that led them to find some career outside of the classroom, despite being educators at some point in their careers.
Yeah, I don't want to give much away, but Dr. Asia's own personal story is how this came to fruition. I'm always inspired by folks who use their own pain and then turn around and create something that helps someone else.
Yeah, the exit interview really came about because she left teaching and really wanted a chance to tell her own story, fought to get an exit interview with the superintendent of the district, and realized that she was not alone in having that desire to be able to tell her story, to be heard. And so she refers to her work with this term that I think is just like so beautiful as archival justice.
Right.
She's capturing these stories of people who maybe didn't have their story listened to, never had a chance to even tell their story in the first place, and archiving them for the sake of justice.
And you just saying that reminds me that as everyday people, we can be holders of archival justice by listening to people's stories, by believing their experiences. And so it's such a powerful term. I'm glad she introduced it to us.
Yeah. All right. Should we take a listen to Dr. Asia?
I'm looking forward to it.
My name is Dr. Asia Lyons. I am the CEO of Lyons Educational Consulting. I am a podcaster. I host and produce the Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators. I'm a mom, a wife, a bird mom. Mr. Prince Charming is my bird. And I go out in community and speak about healing from racial battle fatigue, specifically for the betterment of the souls of Black educators.
You were a classroom teacher before.
I was 12 years, yeah.
When did you know you wanted to be a teacher?
I went to school originally to be a chemical engineer because my dad told me that's what I needed to do, right? And I'm like, whatever Dad says, because he's the best. And flunked out of engineering school in my second year. Was not prepared for any type of college, to be honest. I went to a gifted high school, but what I found was that I was still woefully ill-prepared for college. And so came back to Detroit, and I'm from Detroit, came back to Detroit and knew that I couldn't just like be at home and just start working. So I went to community college. So there was a community college not far from me, and I didn't have a car, so I caught the bus there and signed up to be a business major because I wasn't sure what I wanted to be, and was put in work study at the child care center at the community college. And about a month in, someone said, who worked there, her name is Jennifer, like, you should be a teacher. Like, you're really good with kids. And that was it. Went home. I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? I got to figure this out. You know, at this time, I'm maybe 20. And the next day went back, changed all my classes over to education classes or pre-education classes, finished there. And then the next bus stop over was the University of Michigan's Dearborn campus. So I was like, well, I don't have a car. I could just keep catching the bus. And that was it. I was a teacher.
Awesome.
What'd you teach? What age kids?
Yeah, I taught fourth grade for a year, fifth grade for 5 years, and sixth grade for 6 years. And when I taught sixth grade, I taught a math class. And then I also taught towards the end of my career in teaching social justice as a class.
I love it how you're like, at 20, I need to figure this out, because that's how I am, and I'm way far from 20. So it's amazing how we put that pressure on ourselves to figure that out right then. And I'm thankful that you had someone who saw in you a teacher and shared that with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I never saw myself in education at all. I'm not from a family of educators. And the child care center just seemed like it was fun. And they were littles, 3 to 5 age. And I really enjoyed it. But yeah, I loved my teaching career so much. I had a great time.
And then you left teaching.
And then I left teaching.
Tell us that story.
Oh yeah. So, so like I said, I taught for 12 years in a local school district, and the principals, when they hired me, said, "You're teaching math for 3 classes, but the other 2 you can teach whatever you want." And so, my first few years at that middle school, I taught math and sports and financial literacy, math and art, things like that. But then, in my 11th year, I decided to teach social justice. And social justice class, the big question was like, what happens in our society when humanity is lost, right? And so my idea was to teach the first unit, and then the students got to vote on the rest of the units for the semester. And I taught 150 students, and very similar topics: gender equality, supporting our unhoused communities, animal cruelty, race, racism, and anti-racism, and some other topics. Totally went fine. It was great. The kids loved it. The family supported it. My principal supported it. The second year, Trump was elected, and everything changed. So I remember the second year that I was going to teach social justice, back to school night, I could see in the parents' faces that came into my class, they were looking around, that it was going to be, I said to myself, it's going to be a rough year. I just knew that they were not going to be on board with what I was going to be talking about. I had my protest posters around the room. It was just, yeah, and this is a Black woman standing in front of them talking about social justice. And I was right.
What were the demographics of the school?
Yeah, it was about 60% white, 40% kids of color. And like I said, my families before that, same demographics, were totally for it. And again, I had the permission of my principal, but I had a guest speaker come to my class who was talking about loving their Muslim neighbor and what it means to, you know, stand up for others and things like that. And the kids are super excited about her, and showed their parents, like, this is who came to our class, and really excited. And the parents just flipped out. And I feel like they were just waiting for something, some reason. And they're just like, we don't want our kids learning that.
Learning what exactly?
Learning about like loving Muslim people, like race. It was about gender equality, about LGBTQ communities. And at first, you know, my principal was like holding the line, like, no, this is great, this is fine. And the parents started pulling their kids out of my class. And so across the classes that I taught, I had about 17 students whose parents just let them sit in a counselor's office.
Rather than go to class.
Class.
Would rather have you learn nothing than learn to love your Muslim neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. But you know, if you need an excuse, this is it. My principal ended up paying another teacher extra FTE or extra time to teach that group of kids, that group of white students. In a system where we don't have enough money, we just go ahead and put them in a class. And eventually she told me I had to stop teaching social justice altogether. And when I told my students that, like, hey, this is mid-year, like October, we're going to have to change subjects. I'm sorry. They're like, we know why. It's those families. I'm telling like my first period class, I'm trying to be, you know, make sure I'm nice and neutral, because Lord knows I don't want to be accused of inciting an issue. But as I'm telling them what's happening, the kids started tearing paper out and making little protest posters. And they're like taping rulers to pieces of lined paper. And then they started making like a little petition. These are 6th graders, 11-year-olds.
Of course, they're the best.
They are the best. That's why I love my kids so much.
They really are.
Then the second period, you know, the same thing. And then between second and third period, I sent an email to the office. And I was like, hey, office counselors, everybody on the first floor, security, my students may be upset that this is happening, and they might be I'm telling you, there might be protesting. So just kind of prepare for that. By third period, they were like, we're ready. Like, it's a go. They protested. They went to the lunchroom. They're mad. They're yelling. They went to the office. They're protesting in front of the principal's office. I was like, this is amazing. And also
Gonna be bad.
Yeah. And my principal ended up putting me on leave that day, and she accused me of telling them to protest. I was on leave for 2 weeks while they investigated. Now, the year that Trump was elected, Time Magazine had the person of the year was a protester. And we'd already been talking about how to stand up for yourself. So I'm like, oh, y'all passed the test. When I was put on leave was a Friday. On that Monday, the district had a board meeting, and the news was there. And the parents who wanted me kicked out were at the board meeting trying to convince the board to fire me. And the news put that on the news that night. And my students on Tuesday didn't see me come back to work. So they're like, oh, they fired her. And they did a walkout and a silent protest. Right. And so I'm at home and my colleagues are sending me like grainy photos of kids lying down in front of my classroom. And by that year, I taught every kid.
Oh my
like
gosh.
every kid. I had 6th, 7th, and 8th graders walking out of the school. Like control was lost by my principal. Yeah. And when I got back and they found out, actually, you didn't tell them to do that. I guess they just care enough about social justice that they did this. And from October until I left in May, my principal made my life hell. Everything that she could do to make my life miserable, she did it. The thing that I think sticks out most to me is we have Black History Month, of course, every February. And of course, because I was one of the few Black educators in the school, it was a lot of me doing Black History Month. I put posters up from different folks just about Black history and quotes and things. And I walked into the library and there's like gaps in where the posters were. There was some missing. And I asked the librarian, like, where's my posters? And she just looked at me. And I emailed the principal and asked her, what posters did you take down and why? And she said she took down, one of them was a Kaepernick poster because she didn't know, as a white woman, what Colin Kaepernick had to do with Black history.
Wow.
Dr. Asia, I was already teetering. I was already teetering.
Pushed Val off the edge.
I'm off the edge. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But it was things like that constantly. And the parents who wanted me fired, because I was not fired, just continued to just bother me or come into my classroom and just sit there in my classroom and observe my class. And I think around February, after Black History Month, I did what I always call like the Shawshank Redemption move, which is like one thing at a time back home, like taking this home, I'm taking that home because I'm getting free. I'm getting free. And so by the last day of school, I put my laptop in we had to put them up anyway, took my ID, threw it in the garbage, and I just never went back.
Oh, goddamn.
Yeah.
That's the story.
That's the story.
I'm curious, what happened to your students who protested?
When I got back to work 2 weeks later, they were in class and they were so happy.
Okay.
Like, I protested, Mrs. Lyons. I said something. They were so excited. It's funny because last summer, I had a student who reached out to me who is now in college, who is my student. And it's like, I want to talk to you about being a teacher. Since your class, I've been speaking up about white supremacy and things like that. So it was really cool for her to say, like, I remembered that.
Yeah. I asked that because I also wanted to know, did those parents show up for you in any way throughout the rest of the year?
That's a really good question. I had parents who, to me, advocated, and I had a few that went to the principal and advocated for me. But there's something to be said about the ways that white supremacy works in droves. Like the folks who hated me had a lot of time on their hands, right? They were able to just take off and be sitting in my classroom and constantly bothering me because they had the permission of the principal.
Right.
They had the power. And my principal's boss, who was a Black woman, also was fine with this behavior. So, I felt like the parents and community, when they saw me go into my car or whatever, they were definitely like, I appreciate you. I don't know how much that translated to the principal's office, like what she heard or did not hear from the community.
You are one Black teacher. Your story, I mean, obviously there are unique elements to it. I'm sure nobody has quite the exact same story, but it is a familiar story.
And to be clear, you didn't leave teaching. You were forced out of the...
Yeah, definitely experienced push out, 100,000%. Yeah.
And obviously you had poured so much into those kids that they had learned so much. I mean, I think about what values do you want your kids to learn? I think it's important that they know some math. But if they know that when they see injustice, they need to do something about it, I would certainly much rather my kids get that from their school.
Yeah.
And so, what a tragic loss for those kids, for that community, for that school district, and for, all the kids who came after who didn't get that opportunity. But that kind of inspired your podcast, The Exit Interview. Tell us about the podcast, why you started it and what you're hoping to achieve with it.
Yeah, you see this big smile on my face because I love The Exit Interview. So The Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators, came because the summer that I left teaching, I was pushed out of education in that sense. I made the decision that I wanted an exit interview, and my school district was not offering those. That wasn't a thing that they did. So I emailed the superintendent and I said, I want an exit interview. And I just kept emailing him until he responded. And I brought my sheet of paper and I said all the things I had to say about my racialized experience, about the experience of Black educators in his school district, because I knew many of us that were leaving that same year, not with the expectation that he would change, but that I get to say my 2 cents. Right. And I was walking back to my car and I thought there's so many Black folks who leave education who never share their story. And that's how the podcast started. And so it's what I now know is archival justice work, right? We know that human resources departments, we know that other spaces are not going to share our stories. They're going to, even if they collect exit interview information, it's quantitative. It's rarely disaggregated by race. So the podcast is in its 5th season. We're 65 or so episodes in. I've recorded my podcast live at South by Southwest EDU this year. It was really exciting. Thank you. But that's the work. It's collecting the stories, archiving the stories of Black folks who've left the field of teaching, whether they be higher ed, ECE, school psychs, teachers, therapists, paraprofessionals, so that we can just say that this is our story and this is why we left, and then continue to heal, to be on that journey to healing.
That healing piece seems like such a big piece of it. In the episodes I've listened to, you often have people who clearly the story is like dying to come out. Yeah. But for a lot of people, it's like the first time that anybody has asked them about it, the first time that they've had a platform to actually share it. And there's like a real sort of sense of catharsis in actually just like putting that out. I mean, aside from the sort of like potential policy implications or what you could do with it at all, like why does it feel important to just have that space for people to speak their truth?
Because we don't often get the opportunity to speak our truth. It also is because, like you said, folks have been sitting on that story for 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And so that's the work. It's like laying that space out for them to share their stories because at that time they're ready. And for me, it's not about like, I hope human resources hears this or union hears this. It is like, I hope you felt good saying that. I hope that you know that I believe you and the community of listeners believes you, and that's good enough.
Yeah, and that you felt heard.
Yeah, 100%.
Seen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So was this what your dissertation was about?
Good question. So my dissertation is on the ways that Black people in education experience racial battle fatigue.
Got it.
And how it crosses over into our families and communities. And that was off the back of my own experience, right? And so the podcast happened at the same time that I was going to school. I knew that at the same time that I was having this exit interview experience, I knew that I wanted to research racial battle fatigue. And so it all kind of tied in very closely together around the same time.
Right. All right, talk to us about racial battle fatigue.
Yeah, so what racial battle fatigue is a term coined by William Smith, shout out to him. And it is the amount of time lost coping with racism. And it's the way that our bodies respond to racism. So racial battle fatigue is not racism. It's just how our bodies respond to it, our mental and our physical. So you have racialized experience like I did in school. And so then I was unable to sleep. My heart was always beating really fast when I went into school, crying in the car before school, right?
Sounds like your blood pressure was up.
Blood pressure was up, right. Some people show signs of resentment, hair loss, hives, like I said, panic attacks, like lots of ways that we're responding, rehearsing the situations in our mind and thinking over and over about a future racialized experience that we might have, like at a parent-teacher conference, or rehearsing something that already happened. I should have said this. I should have said that. That's what I was interested in understanding because for me, that October or September to May, I always tell people it's like my marriage was on threads. Right. I was just not the person I was. And it wasn't just impacting me. It was impacting my family and my community. I was not the person I had been before that. And that's the part of it that I'm adding to the research, or I've added to the research, is Dr. Smith talks about racial battle fatigue in educators. But I really want to know like what happens in the family dynamic too when we bring that home to our communities, our children, our spouses.
You don't leave it at the school. It's not like you experience it at school and then you go home and everything's fine. It's going to show up in the way that you are a spouse. It's going to show up in the way that you're a parent. It's going to show up in the way that you're a sister or a friend or a community member.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
There's a lot of talk about the recruitment of Black educators. We had Leslie Fenwick and Noliwe Rooks talking about the loss of Black educators and the harm that caused to the education system, both the harm to those individual educators who lost their jobs, but also the culture of learning and education that suffered from that. And we talked to Sharif El-Mekki about, recruitment efforts trying to bring more Black teachers into the profession. It seems like a lot of your focus is on what happens when you get there, more on the retention piece than the recruitment piece. What have you learned from the exit interview about what it takes to actually, create a place where Black educators not just will show up, but will stay?
Yeah, what I've learned is that there's so many different reasons why we leave. When I first started the podcast, I first thought about the research because my mind was thinking about racism. I wasn't thinking about the other reasons why we leave, right? And so this has been illuminating for me. I'll say that one of the reasons why folks leave is because they're not believed, that their stories aren't heard, right? They speak up for children, they speak up for themselves and their colleagues, and they're just not listened to. Another reason that comes up, particularly around Black women, who mostly the ones that come on the podcast, even though it's for everyone, is misogyny in the workplace. And specifically Black men in leadership above them who have caused harm, right? That's coming up more and more often. Of course, people talk about pay and the pay disparity, and specifically my ECE folks, my early childhood education folks are talking about this pay disparity. As a side note, I'm on a research team for a local university, and we found out that Black early child educators in the city of Denver are paid $3.58 less per hour than their white and brown counterparts with the same experience. So that's $7,500 a year. And we already know ECE is grossly underpaid.
That's significant.
Which causes racial battle fatigue, which causes on and on. So those are some of the themes that come up from the podcast.
65 stories of educators leaving. I mean, and it doesn't seem like you're ever struggling to find people to come tell their stories.
Not at all.
There's plenty more stories to be told. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. And also, I just want to say, too, those same folks, obviously, their families were involved in seeing the ways that the districts and education institutions have harmed them. So that's a big piece of it, too. It's like you said before, Andrew, it isn't just the educator. The family and community always suffers with them.
Yeah. Can you tell us one of those stories that sticks out to you of kind of the impact beyond just the educator or just the classroom, but out into the family or the community?
I think about Dr. LaShawn Stitt. So Dr. LaShawn Stitt was a assistant principal of a all-boys school on the East Coast. And she talked about in her interview how her principal was a Black man, and he will be sleeping in his office while she was working. And she went into the office one day, and the secretary was slamming the cabinets and things. And she's like, "What do you do? What's going on?" And the secretary points, and they open the door, and his head is down. And she's like, "He's always sleeping." And in that same school year, she said that the janitors took off for 4 or 5 days. And so she was in the hallway mopping in her suit and cleaning bathrooms. And she said that the school nurse asked her, "You don't look good. Let me check your blood pressure." And her blood pressure was sky high. And she said, "I'm going to call the ambulance to come and get you." And Dr. Stitt's response was, "Wait, my son is here at the school. Let me just go to the doctor. I'll promise I'll go get my checkup," right? But her mind was on how her child was going to get home and who was going to take care of her child if she went to the hospital, which she should have gone to. And she ended up telling a story how she got her checkup, blood pressure was high, but also found out that because she hadn't been drinking water, because that's what teachers love to do is not drink water, she actually had to have a procedure for her kidneys. And so the cost to the family of time and money impacted her son. So that's just one example of, like I said, many of folks whose families are impacted by experiencing harm in school systems. It's internalized racism, right? It's white supremacy within Black folks. So it's always racism there present, but we never expected to be an all boys a school for Black and brown boys for Black excellence. We don't expect to see it there. The more and more I'm seeing the harm to Black women in spaces like that.
I'm thinking about the put your mask on before you can help anyone else.
Yeah.
Right. And so her being unable to care for herself in a way that still jeopardized all the things that she was trying to protect anyway. And how oftentimes Black women in particular show up that way, right? I'm going to do all of these things in order to keep my family safe or secure or the job or the place running, and they still fall apart because you have fallen apart, right?
Josephine Ampao came on the show a little while back, and she said, in the analogy of the airplane going down in mass, she's like, you have to remember the airplane is going down. Like the oxygen doesn't come, the little bag doesn't come down just for fun. The bag is coming down because the plane is crashing.
Something has gone wrong.
Yeah. This is not like a little check. Like, no. And when she said that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Because we always say, put your mask on because the plane is crashing.
Oh my gosh, that just blew up my whole world. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Asia. Thank you.
Shout out to Josephine. She's a licensed therapist. Brilliant Black woman.
I think I'm feeling the tension of needing and wanting Black educators in our schools and recognizing the pain and harm that is often caused to them.
Yeah.
Like, how do you balance that tension? Do you ever find yourself thinking like, dang, I wish I could have convinced you to stay?
Yeah. As far as that balance is concerned, beyond the podcast, I co-founded and co-facilitate what's called the Black Educator Wellness Cohort. And the Black Educator Wellness Cohort is a space here in Denver for Black educators, women and non-binary educators, for their healing, who want to stay in education but need some space to talk about what it means to be well. And it's a 10-month cohort that starts in September and it goes through June, where every month we meet once a month for a half a day. We build tools. We create tools to be well and to support our family and to cry and to laugh and to find joy and liberation and put words to our feelings and just be on this journey for healing. Mm-hmm. And because that cohort exists, I know that I'm also doing the work of sustaining educators that are still in education. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So folks on the exit interview, if you left, I understand. And folks, if you want to stay, I understand that too. Mm-hmm. And so I don't feel this tension in my work at the podcast because I have this other work with the wellness and well-being of Black educators, because I still want that to be true, but I don't want people to walk into the space and think everything is just wonderful.
Yeah.
There's this balance, this beautiful balance of archiving your story on this side, and then how do we make sure that you on this other side are well, are happy, are seen. And because the folks in the cohort are from multiple districts, right? Then it's like, okay, especially in the state of Colorado with less than 1,000 Black educators.
Say that again. The entire state of Colorado.
The entire state of Colorado, less than 1,000.
Yeah.
It's funny because the cohort is in year 3. And I think after this year, we can say with our full chest that we've supported 1% of the state's Black educators.
Right. What does it look like at either the school level or particularly I'm thinking about, parents, particularly white and privileged parents showing up in school spaces to kind of take this seriously, racial battle fatigue as a concept seriously, and the idea that, it's not enough to just say we want Black educators in our school, but we have to actually change the experience of being educators. How do we show up better?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think that we have to make sure that families, white families, families of color too, hold the line and say wait, what happened to Dr. Asia? What happened to other? And then start pushing that conversation of where are these folks going? Why is our school not retaining Black educators? You just introduced us to the new school psych 2 years ago, and now she's gone.
Right.
And continually putting that in front of the administration to say, we know this, and this is a problem. And even though they may not know specifically it's racial battle fatigue, to even start to say, we're not going to just be watching this happen, but we're going to advocate and say, this is not okay. Someone's causing harm. There's some harm being caused. And I wouldn't suggest families going and finding the educator because people can be in a really fragile state or just I don't want to talk about it. But I would say to continually talk about to administration, to our school boards, that they notice these things are happening. And here's the research as to why it's important to have Black educators and retain them. And then constantly be saying retention and let's lessen that recruitment conversation, right? Because when we talk about retention, we're talking about the end of harm-causing experiences versus pulling out the tablecloth and having a nice shiny brochure and a moving bonus. That's two different conversations.
Right.
We are repeating this moment with reelecting a president. And there are still Black teachers and other teachers of color who are social justice minded, who are in the classroom right now, who are facing things that feel even more difficult because it's such a widespread national movement in every industry to dismantle DEI. What words do you have for them now? What do you want them to know if they can't join your cohort because they're not in Colorado? What is it you want them to know, believe, do, feel?
So the first thing that I would say is there's something to be said about creating healing spaces and being a part of healing spaces. And I don't mean affinity groups that your district puts on. School district affinity groups don't move the needle because they're not supposed to. They gather, you put some stuff on sticky notes, you eat Qdoba, you leave, and nothing happens, right? So like, how do you find? And I don't want you to create it because that's more labor. But how do we find spaces online or in person that promote our wellness, so that we don't feel isolated? I think it's important to not isolate ourselves when we're experiencing harm or we're burning out, because racial battle fatigue and burnout are not the same. So just be very clear about that. But when we experience these things, we don't want to go into isolation. So it's really important to find community. And that maybe folks who are educators, they can understand the nuances of education. Dr. Smith, when he was on my show, he talked about, it's important to eat well. It's important to be in nature. It's important to set up your home so that your home is full of Black excellence, right, and love and Black culture. We also talk about it's important that as families of Black educators that we help folks come back to regulation, because if you're experiencing harm, you're going to be dysregulated, and you come home and you're just dumping on your family. So like, how do families seek supports to make sure that they're there to hold space, but then also to shift from, okay, we're venting. Now, what do we do now? Like, how do we heal? Because that's important too, is that we get our families and communities involved in the healing of our Black educators who are experiencing harm.
That makes total sense to me. And we've also talked about the ways that families and communities are harmed by racial battle fatigue. How do you avoid somebody feeling like, oh crap, now I'm not like getting my family to help me either. I'm failing at school and like I come home and I'm like not doing a good job at home and my family's not helping me. So like I'm doing a bad job at all of this.
Family therapy is important, right? And so the therapist can teach you, or like, if this person is having this experience and going through this loop, this is how we're going to support. So that the family has the equipment. They want to help. And I'm not saying don't tell your family. I'm saying sometimes we don't have the tools. And we're also experiencing racial battle fatigue.
Secondhand racial battle fatigue.
Yeah. Like, how do we make sure that our families have the tools, right? One thing with the cohort that we've been talking about for cohort 4 starting next year is that along with the folks in the group, we're also going to provide supports and services for the families of those folks in our group, so that they don't see like this person is leaving them, right? Dang, they just doing such a great, look at them healing and like leaving them behind, but also having some space to heal and be well. Think about it as a community effort, as a family effort, that everyone is figuring out how to support that person. Or for most folks of color who have family of color, we're all figuring it out. So you all benefit from that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly not calling you a college dropout. We'll start with like, it was your gap year.
A gap 2 years.
A gap 2 years.
A gap
before,
2 years.
Your journey to become Dr. Asia. And I feel so grateful that you are in this space and that you are loving on educators around the country. So thank you.
You're welcome. I love it. It's my life's work. It feels good. It's a wild way to come to it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm super grateful for the work and that the community supports it and sees the benefits of it, for sure.
Yeah, it's beautiful. The work ripples wide and far, and not just the educators that you're impacting directly, but people getting to tell their story and speak their truth, and then people hearing those stories and getting their own sense of healing. And when you think about all of the families who are positively impacted by that, and then all the students who are positively impacted by that, it's important. It's good work. Grateful for you coming on and telling us about it.
I appreciate you.
So Val, what'd you think?
So going into this interview, I did not anticipate Dr. Asia's personal story to be such a central feature of the conversation.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop listening. It was just gripping in the worst way.
Yeah.
And we mentioned in the intro that she left education, but we want to be clear. She was pushed out.
Right. Absolutely.
And part of the reason that she was pushed out is because of her experience with the white parents in that school who, for all intents and purposes, used their privilege and power to apply pressure to her and the principal. So much so that they opted to have their kids learn nothing instead of learning with Dr. Asia. And I'm floored by this choice. And yet it's a choice that white folks have made throughout the course of history. And so, white man,
yes.
help me understand what is going on.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly, I don't know those particular parents, and yet I certainly know that flavor of parent. And to me, the beauty of the schools where my kids are is that they are more likely to get social justice as part of their curriculum. They are more likely to have conversations about activism. They're more likely to tap into a view that education is a tool for liberation, is a tool to make your communities better. And I think particularly for white parents who get uncomfortable thinking about race, thinking about conversations about race, I think it's easy to project that onto our kids, to assume that if I'm uncomfortable, my kid is probably going to be uncomfortable. If the content that my kid is learning is stuff that makes me kind of squirm a little bit in my seat, is make me feel like, ooh, like how am I implicated by this? It's like a natural response to that to say, well, how do I protect my kid from that? And so you know, the ways that we have gone about that as white folks in our education system most often is to have control over what the curriculum actually is. What are the school books teaching? You know, what classes are on offer? And in the events where we come up against a spot where that's not possible, it's not surprising to me that folks then opt for nothing rather than that thing that they think might make their kid uncomfortable, that thing that they think might somehow cause harm to their kid, without recognizing the, you know, like all the potential that comes from a space like that.
Yeah, that I was deeply disappointed, if I'm honest, by that behavior. And I was deeply disappointed in the administration who felt pressured to make that decision to put Dr. Asia on leave. I'm a parent, so I can empathize with being afraid of something for my child, right? For me, that's not race.
Right.
But I can understand that deep-seated fear that your child is going to be harmed in some way and trying to protect them. But I want to invite our listeners to check out the episode with Susan and Elias titled Gratitude and Validation, One Family's Journey Through Integrated Schools, because what you had in that instance was a young white male who checked all of the privileged boxes and he would tell you this himself, who understood the value of being in that place and learning about others and learning to love and appreciate your neighbors, even when they're different. And so I think that's the root of my disappointment, because what was being taught, and we've talked about this a lot in the last couple of episodes, was about love.
Yeah.
What was being taught was about love and justice for all. And justice for all is what we claim to be about in this particular country. And so I don't know, Andrew, if I'm being super honest, how we win together if folks are so threatened by that particular brand of teaching and learning.
Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine actually together if we're in that mindset. And the hope is that you create more kids like Elias, who is never going to find himself in that position, who's not going to worry about his kids because he's going to have lived it himself. Not that he will ignore the potential discomfort that comes from being in cross-racial conversations. Like, it's not that it's always easy. It's not that it's never uncomfortable. It's not that you never say something you wish you didn't say. It's not that you never come to a disagreement that you can't really resolve interpersonally because there are these structural factors at play. But it's the like comfort with discomfort. It's the learning to be okay with being uncomfortable. And I think we spend so much time catering to white comfort in this country. I think our education system spends so much time catering to white comfort. And you know, there's obviously a cost to Black teachers, right? Dr. Asia told us all about the costs, not just to Black teachers, but also to their families, to their spouses, to their kids, to their loved ones. But there's a cost to everybody. There's a cost to white kids by never giving us the tools to be comfortable with discomfort, to recognize that, like Dr. Muhammad said last episode, like it's through the discomfort that we have the potential to grow. It is in those moments of discomfort that our biggest growth and our biggest potential comes. And like you see that clearly in Dr. Asia's story, right? Because the students that she had taught the year before knew how to advocate, knew how to protest, knew to have a lie down protest in front of her classroom door because they had learned these skills from her. And not that she said, go out and do this protest for me, but she had given them a skill set, a way to express themselves, tools with which to advocate for themselves through education, which is like the ultimate goal, if you ask me, of what we should be doing with education. And
the first thing that would happen if I got a call from the principal saying my kid was protesting in this instance is I'm like, all right, let's go to dinner. Good job. So proud of you.
Yep. My youngest, she's going to 6th grade next year, and they sent out a parent-student handbook, and you had to like agree to a number of things, sit down with your kid and talk through these things. And one of them, I think it was unintentionally worded this way, but it basically said, my kid will not participate in any non-school sanctioned protests. And I refused to sign it.
All right, look at you. Look at you. We'll get our bail money for our kids.
Yeah, so if you could join our Patreon so that I can bail my kid out of jail.
Got to get Andrew's kid out of jail. And so thinking about Elias and the students that she taught who decided to take it upon themselves based on what they learned to stand up and advocate for the teacher that they loved and they felt had done no wrong. That was because they had Dr. Asia, right?
Right.
And something else that struck me in her story is that once she was out of the building, out of that position, there was no other person in that building that could do that work in that same way. So Dr. Asia was the holder of this knowledge. And when she came back and she saw that her posters had been taken down, she recognized that she had a special job in the school in addition to her regular teaching load, of math and social justice. And I'm flabbergasted because so much was lost in her exit from that school.
Yeah.
And so that future that you talk about where even getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, it did not seem there was a group of people who were ready to step into that void.
Yeah.
And that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. It speaks to me of the role of white parents in any school community, but especially in integrating school communities, like that we have to show up and we have to show up in support of justice. Like Dr. Asia was saying, like, hey, where'd that black teacher go?
Right.
Hey, that librarian,
Where'd that black counselor, right?
Why aren't they here anymore? And ask the questions and make sure, because, her example is just one example. And it's certainly something that I'm sure many, many people are familiar with, that a small handful of 17 kids got pulled from her class, right? We're talking about, at most 35 white parents in a large school had the ability to totally shift what the administration prioritized and what the kids ended up learning. And we can lament the fact that that is true. And I wish that her administration had felt more empowered to not cave to those parents. I wish that there had been somebody who had stood up for her more. And as white parents showing up in those spaces, we have to recognize that that power is real as much as we would like it to not be real. We can't just sit back and say, well, I wish that the school system wouldn't cater to my whims, and say like, okay, it's going to. So how do I show up in a way that signifies a value of justice? How do I show up in a way that says this principal is not going to have to answer to me if my kids learn social justice, but this principal is going to have to answer to me if the 3 black teachers aren't here next year. This principal is going to have answer to me if when we're hiring a 2nd grade teacher next year, there's not a black candidate in that. We have to show up in a way that leads with values of justice, such that the ways that our influence in school systems shows up naturally can be more likely to show up for good.
Yeah. I was just thinking that the justice-seeking parents have to be as persistent.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Asia mentioned that there were parents who spoke to the principal who valued her being there. But clearly there was a level of persistence to getting her out.
Yeah.
And, I sunk in my feelings for a little bit when you started talking about the power of the parents of those 17 students who were out, and how you can have an equal number of parents who are fighting for Dr. Asia and it still not mean anything if we don't look a certain way or if we don't have the right connections, and to dismiss an equally passionate group.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a complete dismissal. Is there a scenario where we could bring all parties together and actually like talk about what is happening to try to do some restorative justice stuff? Yeah, absolutely. Like, what is the actual problem here with this curriculum?
How do I assuage your fears? How do I
Right.
acknowledge that it is reasonable to be concerned for your kid? It is reasonable to have fears.
Right.
We want to know that our kids are safe and that they're in a spot. And that applies for all of our kids.
Right.
Like all of our
Right.
kids deserve that. And I mean, I think that this is the potential that exists in public schools is like, those are conversations we have to have as a country.
Right.
We have to
Right.
figure out what are the stories we tell and how do we tell them? How do we acknowledge hard truths while also leaving space for people to acknowledge past harms and not be consumed by guilt about them? And I think the only way we do that is together. And
That's
schools
it.
are this opportunity for a space to practice in little mini ways doing that together.
Yeah, there was many missed opportunities in that. And the more I think about it, the more I'm just deeply disappointed. However, Dr. Asia did not miss the opportunity to be a place of healing for other Black educators.
Yes.
And she used that pain and created with it, right? Created a
Yeah.
space where other Black educators in particular could come and tell their stories about why they left the field.
Finding spaces in education where there is a focus on healing, probably finding spaces in our lives in general where we are all focused on healing, where we are all focused on wellness is important work.
And Dr. Asia just looked at the facts, right? Y'all have like 5 Black teachers in all of Colorado, apparently. Okay.
Less than 1,000 Black teachers. It's wild.
And she felt like I can grab hold of 1,000
Yeah.
Black teachers. I can find ways to support them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is so courageous and so powerful.
Yeah.
You know, a powerful way of turning your pain into something positive that outlasts the pain that you felt. And I want us to draw inspiration from Dr. Asia as a model of what we can do with our pain. When we are tuned into what we need and we use that to create the spaces. And so the whole time she was talking, I was thinking about Clear the Air. So Clear the Air was an online group that I founded back in 2016 because I was looking for a community of educators who cared about these things that I cared about and wanted to learn deeply about the intersections of race and education and justice. And we could just figure it out together, right?
Yeah.
The same goes for you here at the Integrated Schools Podcast, right? You were on the journey already and you wanted to create something to find community, to help be a part of a community.
Yeah.
And so I'm asking all of our listeners to understand that need and try to create as a result of that need that you feel, because you will find yourself within a community that also needs the same thing.
Yes, listeners, channel your pain into something productive, something positive, something that builds community, that brings people in, that gives them a space to tell their stories, to feel heard, to feel seen. And only good things can come of that, I think.
Only good things.
Yeah.
Only good things.
And we want to hear about it. So speaking of sharing your stories, we want to hear your stories. Archive them for justice.
That's
Send
right.
us a voice memo. Speakpipe.com/integrated schools. Go to our website, integratedschools.org, and click on the Leave Us a Voicemail button, or just shoot us an email, podcast@integrated schools. We want to hear your story.
That's right. And while you're on the website leaving a voice memo, we would also like you to hit that red donate button.
Absolutely.
As Andrew's kids are going to be protesting and will need to be bailed out.
my
But
bail
truly, all of your gifts help us sustain this podcast, and we are grateful for all that you can give.
Absolutely. You can also join our Patreon, patreon.com/integrated schools. Another great way to show support and also find some community in that space.
And don't forget to listen and share this episode with others and talk about it. That all matters.
For sure. Val, it is an honor for me to be in this with you. So I try to know better and do better.
Until next time.